The glass doors of Hudson Federal Bank burst open with a cold command, "Security, remove her from the building immediately." The shout split the marble silence, turning dozens of heads at once. In front of them, a petite woman in a dark charcoal blazer was being pushed toward the exit. Yet strangely, she did not resist. She simply smiled as if she had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. 2:47 in the afternoon, the golden haze of late daylight gleamed across the glass edges and washed over the composed face of Dr. Naomi Brooks, 41 years old, a woman who walked with the quiet certainty of someone who had built an empire. Every step she placed on the stone floor echoed like a drumbeat, announcing an approaching storm. Across the lobby, Ethan Ward, 29 years old, sat behind his broad, dark wooden desk. A small throne, he believed, gave him absolute authority. He looked at Naomi with the gaze of a man convinced he had the right to judge anyone. He did not notice the Patek Philippe watch on her wrist, the premium fabric of her coat, or the icy calm in her eyes. The only thing he saw was a woman of color entering his elite bank without what he considered permission. "This bank does not serve people like you," he said, enunciating each word as if stamping humiliation onto her forehead. The clients in the lobby held their breath. Security officer Miguel Torres, 45 years old, who had handled hundreds of disturbances in his career, watched from close by. Yet something about Naomi made him hesitate. She showed no aggression, no raised voice, no signs of agitation, only a frightening level of composure. Naomi placed her leather bag on the edge of the wooden desk, the gesture soft but deliberate. "I am only here to make a routine transaction." She answered her voice, low and smooth, like silk, completely at odds with the tension rising around her. Ethan's face twitched before he forced a smile, a hollow laugh breaking across the lobby. "Routine. Here, do you have an account at Hudson, or are you here to stir up trouble and demand compensation?" From the right side of the lobby, Alyssa Mendoza, 26 years old, started a live stream. Her whisper slipped into the microphone. "Oh my God, everyone look at this. The manager is actually losing it." The viewer count jumped from 200 to 350 to 500. The louder Ethan grew, the more he performed for the crowd. "You are disrupting the bank. I am ordering you to leave before we call the police again." Naomi looked directly at him. Her eyes held no defiance. They held something stronger insight, as if she had already seen the end of his story long before he opened his mouth. She slowly pulled out her wallet, just enough for the silver edge of a centurion card to catch the light. But Ethan was too busy flaunting his authority to even look. "Why are you still standing there?" he snapped. "Security!" Torres stepped forward, swallowing hard. She actually has not violated anything. She is trespassing," Ethan barked. A sudden silence fell. The air thickened. Every gaze fixed on Naomi. She glanced at her watch. "You have 2 minutes," she said softly. 2 minutes. Ethan scoffed. 2 minutes for what?" "To hand yourself over to security." Naomi did not respond. She took out her phone, opened her contacts, and called one person. Her voice was neither loud nor forceful, yet sharp enough to cut through the suffocating air. Ben Code 7 Midtown branch now. She ended the call after exactly 12 seconds. The live stream view count surged to 1,200, then 3,400. Amid the confused stares, Naomi stood calm at the center of the storm. Ethan felt a chill crawl down his spine, but reassured himself. "Who did you call a lawyer? I am not afraid." "No," Naomi replied gently. "Someone with more authority than you imagine." 2:59 in the afternoon. The front doors burst open again with hurried footsteps. Benjamin Miller, 52 years old regional director of North City, rushed into the lobby, a sight no one had witnessed in his 20-year career. His eyes swept the room, then landed on Naomi, and instantly shifted to panic. "Dr. Brooks, oh my God, I am so sorry." The lobby erupted with whispers. Ethan froze where he stood. The live stream crossed 10,000 viewers. Torres stepped back. Alyssa whispered excitedly into her phone. "Plot twist, an actual plot twist, you guys." Benjamin went straight to Naomi, his voice trembling. "We take full responsibility. Please do not be upset." "Would you like to go directly to the 52nd floor?" Ethan finally began to understand. His eyes widened. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. A terrifying question rang in his mind. "What have I done?" Naomi tilted her head, looking at him, not with anger, but disappointment. 2 minutes, she reminded him. "And you used them to bury your own career." The viewer count climbed to 12,000, then 15,000. And in that moment, in the marble lobby, surrounded by dozens of phones, capturing everything, Ethan Ward realized he had just tried to throw out the founder, the chief executive officer, the chairwoman of the board, and the largest shareholder of the bank from her own institution. And Naomi, she simply looked at him and smiled again, the smile of someone who knew that every unjust system, every blind prejudice collapses the moment truth steps in. "Let us go," she said. "It is time to speak with the board." And the entire bank held its breath, witnessing the storm of power rising quietly from the very woman they had underestimated the most. The elevator of Hudson Federal Bank closed behind them with a soft chime, sharp enough to slice through the air, and the moment the doors sealed shut, silence spread like spilled oil among the 4 people inside: Naomi Brooks, Benjamin Miller, Ethan Ward, and Laura Kim. Naomi stood before the control panel without needing to press anything, because Benjamin had already done it before stepping in the 52nd floor, where the power of the entire bank was waiting. The warm, golden lights of the elevator illuminated Naomi's face, highlighting a terrifying calm. Not the calm of someone who had been insulted, but of someone who fully understood that she had the authority to determine the fate of the person who had caused it. Ethan stood in the corner, shoulders trembling slightly, his hands ice cold, despite the perfectly regulated temperature. He tried to breathe deeply, but every breath snagged as if an invisible hand were tightening around his chest. The only sound left in his head was a looping echo. "I just kicked out the chief executive officer. I just kicked out the chief executive officer from her own bank." Laura held her tablet to her chest, like a shield eyes fixed on the elevator floor, though her mind was spinning. She had not insulted Naomi herself, but she had stood beside Ethan. She had supported him. She had stayed silent when silence was the worst choice. And silence sometimes is complicity. Benjamin stood behind them, watching the floor numbers climb from 5 to 6 to 7, then to 10, with a steady but urgent rhythm, each number ticking down toward a verdict. He wiped the sweat at his temple, not because he feared Naomi, but because he knew exactly what waited on the other side of the glass doors of the executive boardroom. Hudson Federal was a large bank, yet any mistake involving discrimination was a live explosive placed directly under the chairs of its leadership team. Naomi, the founder, always humble, always letting her partners stand in front, had just proven that a single careless moment from a subordinate could shake an entire financial empire. When the display lit up at the 18th floor, Ethan spoke for the first time since the doors closed. His voice was small, trembling, stripped of every fragment of arrogance. "Dr. Brooks, I truly did not know who you were." Naomi turned her head, her eyes sharp and deep, like the cold edge of a blade sliding across the skin of the person facing her. "If I had told you I was an ordinary customer, would you have treated me differently?" Ethan swallowed hard, voice cracking. I was just following procedure." "No," Naomi replied, crisp and final. "You were following prejudice." The 22nd floor lit up. The air tightened. Benjamin shot Ethan a look that held both anger and pity. "You should stop talking," he murmured. But Ethan did not listen. He needed something to cling to while the world inverted around him. "If you had just explained from the start, if you had told me you were Naomi," cut him off with a sentence that froze the elevator into an icy stillness. "I wanted to see how you treat people you think do not matter." The words made Laura lift her head, her heart twisting. Miguel Torres had not come up with them, but the sentence struck the truth. He had once believed that sometimes an employee only acts decent when facing someone they consider important, and Naomi had used silence, calm, and truth to expose the opposite. The 33rd floor lit up. Benjamin tightened his grip around the stack of documents in his hands. "Naomi," he said softly, "I am sorry this happened. We should have trained our staff better. This is my failure." Naomi shook her head. "It is not solely yours. This is a systemic issue, and today we will fix it." The 40th floor. The air felt compressed. Ethan grew nauseous, his vision blurring with panic. He pictured what awaited him: termination, the press, social media, a career ruined before he turned 30. Naomi, meanwhile, thought about the countless people who had stood where she just stood. People dismissed because of their skin color, gender, or appearance. She thought of her mother who had once been denied a loan because she didn't look appropriate. She thought of the reason she founded Hudson Federal, to build a bank free of discrimination, and how ironic it was that the very bank she built had tried to expel her because a young man believed his tiny piece of authority was absolute. The 47th floor. Ethan's breath came in shallow gasps. Laura clutched her tablet tighter. Benjamin closed his eyes briefly, like a soldier bracing for the battlefield. Naomi stood tall shoulders, relaxed chin, slightly raised, the posture of someone fully prepared to face any pressure. The 50th floor, the 51st, the 52nd. A chime. The elevator doors slid open, and the brilliant light of the boardroom spilled inside. Outside was a granite-lined hallway, art pieces along the wall, and the glass doors leading to the large meeting room where 14 board members sat around a long, polished walnut table. Benjamin opened the door. A wave of executive authority rolled out. Inside, premium suits, silver hair, and powerful eyes, all lifted at once, and every expression froze when they saw Naomi Brooks walk in with 2 trembling employees behind her. The chairman of the board, William Grant, 69 years old, raised his glasses from his nose. "Naomi, what on earth?" But he did not finish the sentence. Naomi raised her hand, stopping him. "We have a serious incident at the Midtown branch, and you need to see it immediately." Benjamin shut the door. The board shifted in their seats. Ethan trembled so violently his teeth clicked. Naomi placed the tablet on the table and connected it to the large monitor. In a moment, the screen lit up, showing the exact moment Ethan screamed at her. "People like you do not belong here." The temperature in the room dropped, as though someone had opened a freezer. The most powerful eyes in the bank, locked onto the footage. And the tribunal, the process that would decide the fate of one man and the future of an entire system, had officially begun. Inside the boardroom on the 52nd floor, cold white light fell across the walnut conference table, casting long, sharp shadows over the faces of every board member, as if the room itself were delivering judgment. On the large screen, the footage of Ethan Ward shouting at Naomi inside the bank lobby played back his voice, ringing with contempt. "People like you don't belong here." The words slammed against the glass walls, then recoiled straight into the chests of everyone seated at the table. A silence, heavy as concrete, dropped over the room. Ethan stood in the corner, his hands clenched so tightly his knuckles turned pale. He could not look away from the worst version of himself being projected in front of upper leadership. This was no longer a mistake. This was professional suicide. Naomi stood upright, her expression not angry anymore, but like someone forced to reveal the rot hiding beneath the polished signs of professional service hanging throughout the bank. Benjamin stood beside her in silent dread, as if waiting for a blade to fall. Laura stood near the door, frozen stiff, her face drained of color because she knew her few minutes of silence in the lobby would also be dissected. Chairman William Grant leaned back in his chair, fingers interlocked, his cold grey eyes fixed on the screen. "Good Lord," one board member whispered when the recording showed. Torres hesitating, Alyssa live streaming, and every word of Ethan's disdain amplified through 4 different phone angles. When the video reached the moment, Benjamin rushed into the lobby and exclaimed, "Dr. Brooks, I am so sorry." The entire boardroom reacted at once. An older board member turned to the others. "Is that Naomi, Chief Executive Officer? Naomi Brooks?" Naomi nodded slightly, and that small nod alone felt powerful enough to shake the entire table. Grant shifted forward, his voice lowering. "Naomi, tell us exactly what happened." Naomi paused the video, her face reflected on the screen, a reminder that the person they were discussing was not just another victim, but the architect of their entire institution. I went to the Midtown branch to audit the service process. No announcement, no name. Just a customer walking into her own bank. Her gaze swept across the board, and I was thrown out. The last sentence was so soft, it nearly sounded like an invitation, yet it chilled the room to the core. "Not just thrown out," Naomi continued. "I was shouted at, threatened with the police, told I didn't belong here, treated as if I were a disturbance." A financial director shook his head. Unacceptable. Unbelievable. Naomi restarted the video, Ethan mocking her, Laura standing beside him silently, Torres hesitating, Alyssa live streaming as the viewer count climbed second by second. When the footage reached the moment, Naomi said, "Ben Code 7 now," and Benjamin rushed in to apologize. The boardroom held its breath. Collins, another board member, looked at Naomi. "You stayed remarkably calm." Naomi smiled, but there was no warmth in it. If I had lost my composure, Ethan would have believed he was right. Grant turned toward Ethan, his voice sharp as steel. "Mr. Ward, do you have anything to say to this board?" Ethan trembled like he had been shocked with electricity. He tried to inhale, but his voice still cracked into a distorted plea. "I didn't know who she was. Naomi cut him off with icy precision. Because you assumed I was no one." Ethan blinked, every cell in his body stripped bare. Grant nodded for him to continue. "I was following security protocol. I thought she was causing trouble. So your protocol is to insult customers," one board member demanded. "No, Or is your protocol to judge customers by their skin color?" Ethan froze in place. Sweat dripped onto the floor. Naomi was not angry, and that calmness made his guilt even heavier. "I want you to tell the truth," Naomi said quietly. "Not so I can punish you, but so you can face yourself." The boardroom became as silent as a graveyard. Ethan opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. "I judged her by her appearance." Grant raised an eyebrow. Specifically, Ethan seemed to be pushed to the edge of a cliff. "I thought she wasn't an important customer. I thought she didn't belong at this bank." The confession spilled out of him, and Laura pressed a hand to her chest while Benjamin turned away. Naomi looked directly at him. "And that is exactly why I founded this bank, so people like me would never be treated that way. Yet I still was." No one breathed. Grant said, "We are facing a transparency crisis. The live stream has spread. I assume it has tens of thousands of viewers." Naomi nodded. 47,000 and rising. A legal officer jolted upright. "We have liability exposure, civil rights scrutiny, public backlash. We must act immediately." Naomi opened her black case and took out a second tablet. "I am prepared." She tapped the screen. A slide appeared. Brooks Protocol. Every head turned. "I do not want punishment," Naomi said, her voice so steady that Benjamin exhaled in relief. "I want correction." She then laid out her plan: real-time customer interaction, evaluation, mandatory bias, prevention, training centralized branch oversight system, wide reporting cycles, and a disciplinary framework for violations. Every bullet point was a precise cut removing the very illness that had led to her being expelled from her own bank. The boardroom stayed silent. Then heads began to nod. One member said, "Excellent," another, "Necessary." No one objected. Grant looked at Ethan one last time. "You have two options: voluntary resignation with a basic severance package or immediate termination for discriminatory conduct." Ethan nearly collapsed. He whispered, I will resign." Naomi turned to Laura. "And you?" Laura's voice shook. "I'm sorry. I stayed silent when I should have spoken." Naomi nodded. "You will undergo 6 months of training. If you can change yourself, you will still have a future here." Grant rose from his seat, drawing every eye in the room. "We will vote now." All in favor of implementing the Brooks Protocol, every hand lifted. Not a single vote against. Naomi closed her eyes for a brief second, not out of relief, but complete resolve. Then Grant announced, "Beginning today, Hudson Federal changes." Naomi looked around the room, a place where power had belonged solely to white men for decades. And here she was, the woman who had been thrown out of her own bank, now reshaping its future. A chime sounded from the hallway, signaling the elevator opening again. Outside, the hurried footsteps of the press echoed closer. Inside, Naomi Brooks stood tall, her eyes gleaming like a blade, cutting through the darkness of an outdated system. The battle to transform this bank had only just begun. The doors of the 52nd floor boardroom opened with a soft metallic whisper. Yet in that moment, the small sound felt like the cracking of an entire outdated system that Naomi Brooks had just cut in half with the weight of truth. Light from the hallway spilled in, stretching across the floor and framing Naomi's silhouette as she stepped out first, upright, calm, and unshakably decisive. Right behind her, Benjamin Miller hurried to keep pace, his face still heavy with responsibility. Ethan Ward collapsed near the doorway, his legs losing all strength after hearing his sentence. Laura Kim followed, clutching her tablet, as if it were the last life raft keeping her from drowning in the incoming tide of consequences. But the thing that captured the attention of everyone on the floor was not Ethan's despair, nor the fear etched across Laura's face. It was the woman who had been thrown out of her own bank less than an hour earlier. Naomi did not look back. She had said everything she needed to say in that room. Now her focus was not revenge, but reconstruction. The long hallway stretched ahead, deep blue carpet unfurling like a runway for a massive aircraft lifting into the sky. Naomi walked as steadily as a veteran pilot with thousands of flight hours. Benjamin feared that Naomi might still be angry, but her silence suggested something else entirely, a strategy forming not an outburst, but a calculation. When the elevator doors opened, Naomi stepped in with Benjamin. Ethan and Laura had been instructed to remain behind for the human resources team. As the doors closed, Naomi's reflection shimmered faintly in the glass. "I know you are calm," but Benjamin began. "Are you not angry?" Naomi looked straight ahead, her dark eyes deep and unwavering. "If I let myself be angry," she said slowly, "I lose my vision." Benjamin exhaled almost in admiration. "You just saved the bank from a meteor explosion." Naomi gave a small smile, though her eyes stayed razor-sharp. "I saved it from itself." The elevator descended. Naomi closed her eyes for a brief moment, gathering her breath. In her mind flashed the image of her mother, a woman who once stood trembling in a bank as a loan officer dismissed her because her career goals were not credible. She remembered the money her family had been forced to borrow at predatory rates because no institution would give someone like her mother a chance. That was why she built Hudson Federal Bank, so that anyone who walked in would be treated with equal respect. Yet today the person disrespected had been her, the one who created that ideal. By the time the elevator reached the first floor, the noise of the lobby rose like a breaking wave. Naomi stepped out to a crowd of whispering customers. Alyssa Mendoza stood near the glass doors recording a follow-up vlog for her channel Justice Live, phone in hand, eyes wide with excitement. As soon as Naomi appeared, Alyssa whispered into her camera, "Oh my God, you guys here. She is the CEO who got kicked out of her own bank, and now she's walking out of that elevator like a queen." Customers moved aside, making a path. Many had never seen Naomi in person, but recognized her instantly from the live stream. Silence spread outward, with every step she took like a still lake, moments before a storm. Torres, the security guard who had hesitated earlier, stood by the entrance, eyes wide with embarrassment. "Ma'am, I am sorry for what happened." "You were not the one at fault," Naomi said, her voice softening. "You sensed something was wrong. That is a good instinct." Torres bowed so deeply his forehead nearly touched his chest. Naomi continued through the lobby, the crowd watching her, with a mixture of respect and second-hand shame on behalf of the bank. But before reaching the exit, she stopped. She turned toward the entire lobby, as if standing on a stage she never chose, but destiny had placed her upon. "I know what happened here has angered many of you," she said, her voice, not loud, yet spreading through the room like an electric current running through steel. "But let me be clear, I am not here to see people lose their jobs over uneducated bias. I am here to change the system that created it." The lobby fell silent. Alyssa lowered her phone for half a second in shock. Torres exhaled sharply, his face stretched with emotion. "We," Naomi continued, "will rebuild Hudson Federal, so no one is ever judged by how they look. Not just for me, but for every customer who ever walked in here and felt dismissed. Customers near the glass doors looked at one another, then nodded. An older woman in the waiting area wiped tears from her eyes. Naomi understood perfectly well that real change does not begin with anger, but with facing the truth head-on. And she had just shown everyone that truth. Benjamin stood behind her, whispering under his breath, "You are exactly what this bank needs." Outside, the evening wind curled around the Manhattan buildings, carrying the crisp chill of autumn. Naomi stepped out of the bank, releasing a slow but steady breath. She knew the hardest part had not begun yet. But what happened in that boardroom had opened the door to a reform that would reshape not only the bank, but the entire idea of fairness in finance. As she climbed into the waiting black SUV, the press and media had just begun to gather. The flashlights had not yet ignited, but Naomi knew that in only a few hours the entire country would hear this story. And upstairs on the 52nd floor, the board was already drafting the press conference. The Brooks Protocol was no longer a proposal. It was now an order. Naomi closed her eyes for 1 second before the car pulled away. In that moment of stillness, she felt it clearly the media storm was coming. But this time, she would control it, not the other way around. News traveled faster than the Manhattan wind. Only a few hours after Naomi left the Midtown branch, the hashtag banking, while black climbed straight into the top 5 national trending topics. The clips Alyssa Mendoza captured inside the bank spread across Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and even Reddit at a speed no one could contain. Each video, only 15 to 40 seconds long, revealed everything: Ethan's disdain, Laura's harmful silence, and Naomi's unnervingly calm restraint. People replayed the moment Ethan shouted in her face, then erupted in outrage online. What he threw the CEO out of the bank she owns. If that were me, I would have smashed the desk in half. She stood there, calm like a queen. Respect. Hudson Federal is done. Shut it down. And in the middle of the public fury, the image of Naomi simply standing still, placing her wallet on the desk and saying one quiet sentence, "I am only here to complete a routine transaction," became a viral meme. The entire country trembled with anger. But Naomi understood something deeply. Outrage was only the spark. She needed to turn that spark into an engine for change. At 9 o'clock that evening, Naomi sat in her office, inside her 63rd floor penthouse, staring down at the city lights swirling below like a vast neural network pulsing with energy. Her screen overflowed with emails from CEOs of major corporations, civil rights groups, journalists, and strangers who felt this story strike a personal wound. I was treated the same way at another bank. I cried watching the clip. Thank you for standing up. We need someone like you to change the financial industry. Across the room, her personal assistant, Grace Turner, 32 years old, filtered urgent emails, prioritizing those that required immediate response. Naomi, CNN wants a live interview tonight. NBC is calling non-stop. Fox Business wants you on their morning show. Naomi shook her head, her eyes sharp as sparks. We do not speak until I am ready. If I say anything too early in this storm, I lose control of the story. Grace nodded quickly, both efficient and worried. The hashtag has reached 5.2 million mentions. The entire banking industry is under fire. Naomi turned her chair away from the screen, leaned back and closed her eyes. Outside, rain began tapping against the glass, Manhattan, sinking into a thick downpour. In that steady drumming, Naomi felt her clarity sharpen. They are not angry at me. They are angry at what I stood up and represented. Meanwhile, in a run-down apartment on the outskirts of the city, Ethan sat collapsed on a torn sofa, face-pale hands gripping his head as he read thousands of hateful messages, along with edited clips branding him the symbol of discrimination in finance. He tried to steady his breathing, but every time he closed his eyes, Naomi's silent, piercing stare resurfaced as a verdict. He knew he was wrong, but the cruelest part was realizing he had no idea how to climb out of the shadow of his own mistake. Across the river, in a small, warm apartment in Brooklyn, Laura Kim knelt beside her bed with her face buried in her hands. She replayed the video dozens of times, asking herself why she said nothing when injustice unfolded inches away. If I had spoken up, if I had just said one sentence, the guilt stabbed her chest like a slow-turning blade. On the 52nd floor of Hudson Federal's headquarters, Benjamin Miller stood alone in the dark boardroom, lit only by the glow of his phone. A message from internal PR popped up. "Ben, national media is swarming us. We need a statement immediately." He closed his eyes and exhaled a long, heavy breath. For the first time in his career, Benjamin felt he was standing on the front line of a battle not about business, but about morality. And he knew exactly who was leading that battle, not him, but Naomi. While the online storm raged outside, Naomi opened her laptop and began typing the first lines of the statement she would deliver at the press conference the next day. But when her fingers paused, her eyes drifted to the framed photo beside her, a picture of her mother standing outside a small suburban bank when Naomi was only 7. Her mother stood there, hands clasped, eyes full of hope, yet turned away because she was not the right customer profile. In that instant, Naomi knew she could not allow what Ethan did to become just another scandal, swallowed by silence, like hundreds of other discriminatory incidents. She would turn it into a catalyst powerful enough to shake the entire industry. The next morning, before the city clock struck 6, reporters already crowded the front of Hudson Federal headquarters. Cameras, microphones, flashlights, all pointed like a forest of spears at the building. Some held signs reading, "Respect all customers no more." "Banking bias. We stand with Naomi Brooks." At 7:45 in the morning, Naomi's black SUV rolled up to the front entrance. As she stepped out, camera shutters exploded like rapid gunfire. But Naomi did not lower her head or dodge. She lifted her chin and walked straight ahead with the stride of someone ready to step into the center of the storm. Reporters surged forward, questions firing from every direction. "Dr. Brooks, will you press charges against Ethan Ward? Are you firing more employees? How much will Hudson Federal pay in damages for this scandal? Do you believe what happened to you was motivated by racism?" Naomi did not answer. Not because she avoided the questions, but because she refused to waste her words before the exact moment she chose. She moved through the press like calm water, cutting through turbulent waves. Inside the building, employees stared at her with expressions completely different from any previous day, awe, sympathy, and deep uncertainty. Naomi walked straight to the elevator that would take her to the 52nd floor. The doors closed. Benjamin was waiting in the boardroom, and when he saw her, he exhaled, as if finally able to breathe. "They are all waiting." Naomi nodded. "Good. Let me speak to the world." And as she placed her hand on the boardroom door handle, she was not just opening a door. She was stepping into a moment that would change the history of Hudson Federal Bank, the banking industry, and the lives of everyone who had ever been underestimated because of bias. The press conference that day would not just be an answer. It would be a declaration of war. The 52nd floor press room blazed with professional lighting, dozens of cameras lined up in 2 dense rows like electronic eyes, waiting for a moment that would become a milestone in the history of American banking. No one dared speak loudly, only the sound of typing, the tapping of microphones, and the tense murmurs of reporters reviewing their questions filled the air. In the front row, representatives from every major news outlet, CNN, NBC, ABC, Reuters, Bloomberg, were present. At the center of the stage stood a walnut podium, polished so perfectly the lights reflected off its surface, like a mirror, the Hudson Federal Bank logo gleaming at its front. But what made the entire room feel heavy was not the setup. It was the person who was about to walk out onto that stage. At 8:01 in the morning, the door opened. Naomi Brooks stepped inside. She wore a sharp-shouldered black blazer, a crisp white shirt, and her hair pulled into a high bun that revealed a face both powerful and impossibly composed. The air shifted as she walked, as if an invisible magnetic field pulled every gaze toward her. Naomi didn't lower her head. She looked straight into the lenses pointed at her and walked with steady, deliberate steps to the podium. Benjamin Miller followed close behind, looking as though a weight had finally lifted, now that the moment they had needed had arrived. When Naomi placed her hands on the edge of the podium, every sound in the room stopped. No more typing, no more whispers, no more mic adjustments. Only Naomi, and a nation waiting. She drew in a deep breath and began. "Thank you all for being here." Her voice resonated warm, clear, steady enough to make every heart in the room pause for half a beat. Yesterday I experienced what millions of Americans, especially Black Americans, have experienced for years. I was dismissed. I was judged by my appearance. I was ordered to leave a bank I founded. The room stirred, several reporters scribbling notes at high speed. Naomi continued, "But what matters here is not that it happened to me. What matters is what this incident exposed." She pressed a button on a small remote. The LED screen behind her lit up with bold letters. "Systemic bias is real." "Systemic bias is real," Naomi said, "and it lives in every interaction, every sentence, every glance, every decision made by people who do not realize they are operating with prejudice." There was no anger in her tone, only truth, cold, solid, undeniable. She tapped to the next slide, Brooks Protocol. "Today," she said, "we are not offering a half-hearted apology. We are not placing blame on a single employee. We are not dodging responsibility. We are implementing change." Naomi laid out each part of the Brooks Protocol, her voice slicing through the haze of the financial world's excuses. First, every Hudson Federal employee will undergo mandatory anti-bias training with no exceptions. Second, each branch will be monitored through a real-time customer interaction analysis system to detect discriminatory behavior the moment it happens. Third, we will publicly release monthly transparency reports on discrimination-related complaints. Fourth, we will partner directly with civil rights organizations to ensure every customer, regardless of skin color, voice, or financial status, is treated with absolute respect. When the final slide appeared, zero tolerance for discrimination. The gravity of her words pulled the entire room inward. A reporter raised a hand. "Dr. Brooks' first question." "Are you angry?" Naomi looked straight at him, her eyes deep, calm, immovable. "I am not angry. I am determined." "Second question," another shouted. "Are you planning to take legal action against the employees who disrespected you?" "No," Naomi answered immediately. "Because if I focus on punishment, I miss the opportunity for change. A Reuters reporter called out, "Is this an admission that the banking industry has a discrimination problem?" Naomi did not flinch. "It is not an admission. It is a fact." Another voice rose from the crowd. "Do you believe your experience was influenced by being a black woman?" Naomi inhaled slowly. She knew this question would appear on every headline. "I believe bias is what stops people from seeing who you truly are." But today they saw. The room fell silent, as though it had swallowed an earthquake. Naomi scanned the rows of reporters. "I do not want any customer to go through what I went through. No one deserves to be dismissed because of their skin color. No one deserves suspicion because of their voice. No one deserves to be thrown out because of their appearance." She paused, her voice slowing but sinking deeper. "If this can happen to a CEO, what has been happening to people with no power?" The question dropped through the room like a thunderclap and went viral instantly. Naomi ended the press conference with a vow. "From today forward, Hudson Federal is not just a bank. It will be a promise that fairness is not a slogan, but a responsibility." As she stepped away from the podium, something unprecedented in the banking industry occurred. The entire press room stood. They applauded. Not polite applause. Applause for someone who had spoken the truth they had never dared speak. Benjamin looked at Naomi with pride so deep his eyes glistened. "You just changed history," he said as she stepped off the stage. Naomi smiled softly. "No, we are just beginning." As she walked out of the press room, the live stream counter crossed 2.1 million viewers in just 30 minutes. The nation was talking about Naomi Brooks, but more importantly, the nation was talking about what she forced everyone to confront. Justice does not appear by itself. It must be built. And Naomi Brooks was laying the very first stone. News from Naomi's press conference spread faster than any media campaign Hudson Federal had ever attempted. Her words appeared on the front pages of the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Los Angeles Times, while CNN replayed her speech throughout the entire day, and the hashtag Brooks Protocol shot straight into the top 3 national trends. While the public erupted in support inside Hudson Federal, a quiet yet forceful revolution had already begun, a transformation built not on promises, but on systems, procedures, and people learning how to see others without bias. Immediately after the press conference, Naomi convened an internal meeting with all regional directors. The large conference room on the 40th floor was packed, not only because everyone wanted to hear direct instructions from the CEO, but because they felt they were witnessing a moment that could reshape the future of their careers. Naomi entered the room carrying a laptop and a tablet. No elaborate PowerPoint, no small talk. She stood at the center, her gaze sharp as a laser cut. Today she began to begin the longest and most important journey Hudson Federal has ever taken. Every eye fixed on her. The Brooks Protocol is not a PR campaign, not a half-hearted apology, and not a temporary reaction to an incident. It is our new system. Naomi made a small motion with her hand. The screen lit up with data charts, the number of discrimination complaints in the past 5 years, the incidents that had been concealed, the projected damage if nothing changed. The numbers were cold, undeniable. "This is the truth," Naomi said. "And we do not fix the truth with slogans. We fix it with action." Benjamin continued, his voice stronger than usual. "All 147 Hudson Federal branches will complete anti-bias training within 30 days. All managers must finish first." A regional director raised a hand. "But CEO, this will put heavy pressure on staff. Some may react negatively." Naomi cut in immediately. though her voice did not rise. No one has the right to object to treating customers fairly. The room fell silent. Another asked, "This AI monitoring it may make many employees feel watched," Naomi replied. "If they fear being watched, it means they fear being exposed." The room froze. A notoriously conservative senior financial director studied Naomi for a moment, then nodded. She is right. Naomi did not gloat, did not glow with pride. She simply continued. "We will also implement conversational pattern analysis. When an employee speaks in a way that reflects bias, even unconsciously, the system will alert the branch manager instantly." Another director frowned. "What about customers? Will this affect their experience?" "Their experience?" Naomi asked back, her eyes sharp. "The only thing that affects their experience is our bias." Agreement spread through the room in a way no one expected. Naomi conducted the meeting like a conductor leading a symphony, no force, no shouting, but every word pulling people into her rhythm. The next section outlined partnerships with more than 20 civil rights organizations. Naomi explained, "We need independent oversight. We need a third party to ensure we are not polishing the numbers. They will have access to internal reports, training supervision, and advisory authority." A low murmur rippled through the room. This was an unprecedented step in American banking history. But they all understood. This was not just reform, this was a new standard. And Hudson Federal would be the first bank bold enough to do it. When Naomi stepped out of the meeting, her phone buzzed non-stop. The governor's office wanted to meet. The NAACP wanted to host a joint summit. Forbes wanted an exclusive interview. The entire country seemed to want to borrow Naomi's momentum to push forward change they had long been waiting for. But Naomi felt no pride, only one question. Is what I am doing enough to prevent the pain my mother endured from happening again? That evening, she sat alone in her office, the city shimmering below her like a vast ocean of glass. Grace entered, holding a public reaction analytics report. "Naomi, you need to see this." Naomi took it. The graph showed the public favorability rating toward Hudson Federal skyrocketing. Grace whispered, "For the first time in 20 years, this bank has reached a record level of public support." Naomi did not smile, but her eyes softened. "We still have a long journey ahead," she said. At that moment, the large screen in the office popped up with a new alert. A video had just gone viral. The video showed employees at the Midtown branch standing in a line, looking directly into the camera, delivering a public apology to Naomi. Laura appeared among them, eyes red. "Dr. Brooks," she said, voice trembling with emotion, "I am sorry for staying silent. I promise to be a better person, a better manager, a better human being." The video spread across the internet with stunning speed. Comments overflowed with support. Respect for those who admit their mistakes. Hudson Federal is doing the right thing. Naomi watched the video to the very last second, then spoke quietly. "That is the beginning." But the message that moved Naomi deepest was not Laura's. It was the flood of messages from customers who wrote that they, too, had once experienced the same humiliation at other banks, dismissal, suspicion, discrimination. But for the first time, they felt someone was fighting for them. Naomi placed her hand on the screen, as if touching each story. In that moment, she understood that the Brooks Protocol was not just a reform initiative. It was the spark for a nationwide movement. And that movement had only just begun. As Manhattan drifted into sleep, Naomi stood by the window and looked down at the city. She knew tomorrow would be another long day, media follow-ups, meetings with civil rights organizations, system-wide training rollouts. But in her heart, one truth had never been clearer. She was no longer fighting alone. A movement had been ignited, a flame had spread, and Naomi Brooks was the torchbearer. 1 week after the historic press conference, the headquarters of Hudson Federal Bank had transformed into the command center of a reform unlike anything the American banking industry had seen. Giant screens inside the operations center, updated metrics in real time, customer satisfaction, soaring complaints, steadily declining, and most importantly, public trust in Hudson Federal reaching its highest level in 10 years. The Brooks Protocol had triggered an unexpected domino effect, with 3 other major banks, Eastbridge Monument Capital and Crown Equity, holding emergency meetings to reassess their internal policies. The CEO of Monument Capital even publicly announced that he would study Dr. Brooks's model. Social media had not cooled down either. Countless videos replaying the moment Ethan shouted at Naomi, followed by Benjamin bursting into the lobby, circulated on TikTok like scenes from the opening of a dramatic finance movie. But while the public was cheering, while the nation was praising Naomi behind the office doors of the banking world, the real battle had only just begun. At the Midtown branch where it all started, the atmosphere shifted completely. Posters reading "Respect for All" hung on every door, every counter, every small conference room. Employees were required to complete anti-bias training within 48 hours, and no one dared offer excuses. Laura Kim, the one who remained silent in the moment that mattered most, had become the most determined participant. She walked from desk to desk, reminding each employee, "Not because Dr. Brooks is angry, but because we must be worthy of the sign on the wall." Miguel Torres, the middle-aged guard who once stood between right and wrong, had now become a lead instructor for the customer interaction workshops. He stood before a small meeting room and said firmly, "I used to think, I am just security, this is not my business. But that day I was wrong. Respect is not just for VIP customers. It is for everyone." Young employees nodded repeatedly, many wiping their eyes after re-watching the old clip. In a corner of the break room, 2 employees whispered, "I cannot believe it. This whole situation made me see banking differently. Yeah, I have worked for years and never realized I had bias until I watched that video." That same week, Naomi began unannounced visits to various branches. No one knew where she would appear next, and that alone pushed every branch to operate like they were under evaluation. On Thursday morning, Naomi quietly entered the Queens branch, posing as an ordinary customer. She wore a light blue blouse, her hair tied in a simple ponytail, and carried a plain tote bag. No blazer, no Hudson logo, no gold accessories. The moment she stepped inside, a young teller named Jamal stood immediately and greeted her with a warm smile. "Good morning, ma'am. How may I help you today?" No suspicion, no hesitation, no attitude. Naomi discreetly noted the moment as a small test. She replied, "I'd like to ask about business accounts." Jamal explained everything clearly, never asking if she had an appointment, never checking her wallet for VIP credentials. When Naomi left, Jamal had no idea the bank's CEO had just marked his name for the Future Leadership Training Program. At the Brooklyn branch, Naomi observed 2 employees assisting an elderly customer who spoke accented English. Instead of showing irritation, one of the tellers patiently repeated every step, guiding him through the entire process. Naomi watched from behind, warmth rising in her chest. What began as a potentially devastating scandal had become the foundation of a new culture at Hudson Federal. But the change extended far beyond the bank itself. In places Naomi would never see, the ripple had begun touching strangers she had never met. In a small cafe in Harlem, a middle-aged man watched Naomi's video and sighed. Maybe it's time to switch banks. Beside him, a young woman nodded. She made me believe in this industry again. Meanwhile, inside the NAACP office, the organization's president reviewed Naomi's press conference and said, "This is someone we need to partner with." She does not just talk, she acts. And the most powerful ripple of all spread through the people who had been wrong. On Friday night, inside a dimly lit apartment on the outskirts of the city, Ethan Ward sat beside an old laptop, his face buried in his hands. He had lost his job, his reputation, everything he thought he had. Yet he replayed Naomi's press conference for the 12th time. When Naomi said, "If this can happen to a CEO, it has already happened to millions who have no voice," Ethan broke down in tears. Not because he was exposed, but because for the first time in his life, he understood that his arrogance had not only destroyed himself, it had wounded people like Naomi, like Naomi's mother, like so many others pushed aside simply for not fitting the template society had imposed. Ethan opened a blank document and began to write, "Why did I do that? What was I thinking when I judged her? How do I make this right?" The words were shaky, uneven, but they marked the first moment of real change for him. While the city buzzed outside, Naomi sat at her desk in the headquarters tower, looking out across the Manhattan skyline. Benjamin entered, holding a thick folder. "Naomi, I have something to tell you." Naomi looked up. "Is something wrong?" Benjamin shook his head, a rare smile appearing. "No, something good. The board just approved expanded funding to roll out the Brooks Protocol nationwide. And there is something else." He placed a newspaper on her desk. The front page showed Naomi at the press conference, under the headline, "The Woman Changing American Banking." Naomi looked at the paper, then lifted her gaze, her eyes softening. "We are not finished." Benjamin nodded. "You are right. But you have started the revolution generations before us hoped for." Naomi stood, walked to the tall window, and placed her hand against the cool glass. Below Manhattan's traffic flowed like a living bloodstream. "We continue," she said, "until fairness is no longer a slogan but a habit." And from the highest floor of Hudson Federal Bank, Naomi Brooks knew one thing with absolute clarity: the battle had begun, and it was spreading wider, stronger, deeper than she had ever imagined. 1 year after the incident at the Midtown branch, Hudson Federal was no longer the bank it once was. It had become a symbol of rebirth. The blue glass headquarters in Manhattan glowed during the celebration of 1 year of the Brooks Protocol, where hundreds of employees, customers, and partners gathered. The lobby that once served as the stage for a viral live stream now carried a completely new identity. Large screens displayed stunning transformation, metrics, discrimination, complaints, down 94%, customer satisfaction, up 32%, and business accounts opened by minority communities, up 41%. And beneath those numbers ran a simple line: "Thank you, Dr. Naomi Brooks, for your leadership." Naomi stood on a temporary stage in the lobby lights, illuminating her face, not with pride, not with self-gratification, but with the quiet steadiness of someone witnessing the harvest of a belief she planted. She did not wear her usual power blazer, instead choosing a simple navy sheath dress with a high neckline conveying respect rather than grandeur. In the front row, Benjamin Miller sat beside Grace Turner, both silent as they watched Naomi as if witnessing an alternate history being rewritten in real time. Naomi began her speech. 1 year ago, this place was the eye of a storm. 1 year ago, we saw cracks we could no longer ignore. 1 year ago, I was told I didn't belong in the place I built. People lowered their heads. That memory still sent chills through the room. Naomi continued, her voice soft but resonant. But today we stand here to prove that change is real when we choose to face the truth instead of running from it. The room went silent, then erupted in applause. At the corner of the hall, Laura Kim stood with her new management team. Over the past year, Laura had become the leading force behind training more than 1,200 employees in bias awareness. Her face today was completely different from a year before, steadier, more confident, the face of someone who had conquered herself. When Naomi called her name, "Today I want to thank those who chose to change," beginning with Laura. Kim Laura's eyes filled instantly. She walked up, bowed her head to Naomi, and whispered into the microphone, "Thank you for not giving up on me." The entire hall grew emotional. Miguel Torres was honored as well. The security guard who once stood between fear and morality had become the director of customer conduct training for the entire bank. His hands trembled as he received the certificate from Naomi, but his eyes were steady. "I once stayed silent," he said, "but the Brooks Protocol taught me that silence is a choice of sides, and I promise I will never be silent again." During the event, someone watched from afar Ethan Ward, not as an employee, but as an ordinary guest. He stood at a distance, avoiding attention, dressed in a simple shirt, holding a tote bag. Over the past year, Ethan had lived quietly, starting over from zero, attending workshops on social equity, volunteering for community lending programs, supporting Black entrepreneurs. No one invited him. He came because he wanted to apologize, not to the cameras, not to the board, but to the woman he had wronged. When Naomi stepped off the stage and people moved toward the refreshments, Ethan approached. Torres saw him, but didn't intervene. Laura froze, stunned to see the man who had nearly destroyed her career. But Naomi turned, and her eyes met Ethan's. No anger, no disdain. Only the gaze of someone who had grown bigger than the wound inflicted on her. Ethan took a breath and spoke in a trembling whisper. "I am not here to justify anything. I just want to thank you for turning my mistake into something that helped thousands of people. And I want to say I am sorry. Fully." Naomi held his gaze, then nodded. "I hope you continue on your new path. Repairing harm is not a single moment. It is a daily choice." Ethan swallowed hard and nodded, as if receiving a chance he did not deserve, but would forever be grateful for. The ceremony continued with a presentation of the year-end achievements of the Brooks Protocol. The video showcased employees at remote branches assisting elderly customers who struggled with English tellers, patiently guiding immigrants through opening their first accounts, internal team meetings, where staff openly apologized to one another for unintentionally biased language. These scenes made many teary-eyed, not because of surface-level improvements, but because they proved the bank was becoming something it had never been before, a place of true fairness. At the end of the celebration, Naomi stepped out onto the second-floor balcony overlooking the lobby. She saw groups of young students taking selfies with Brooks Protocol posters, elderly customers smiling as they asked Torres about new programs, employees who once felt lost, now carrying themselves with confidence. The Manhattan afternoon sun poured in, reflecting off the glass walls in thousands of bright shards like tiny beams of hope. Benjamin joined her hands in his pockets, looking down at the lobby. "Naomi," he said, "if someone had told me a year ago that we would be here today, I would never have believed it." Naomi smiled as she watched people walk into the bank with renewed trust. "Neither would I," she said. "But I know one thing now. Real change always begins in the moment someone is underestimated." And in the golden October light, Naomi Brooks, the woman who once was thrown out of her own bank, stood as a living reminder that sometimes to fix a system, you must allow yourself to be wounded by it first. But when you rise, the world rises with you. As the celebration came to an end and the lobby slowly returned to its usual rhythm, Naomi stood alone before the tall glass wall, her silhouette blending into the golden light spilling across Manhattan. She did not need applause, and she did not need banners praising her name. What she needed was right in front of her employees, greeting customers with genuine respect. Instead of silently assessing the weight of their wallets, customers walking in, not with guarded caution, but with trusting smiles. Conversations unfolding with ease and equality, no longer shadowed by the invisible fence of bias. Benjamin approached and handed her the final report of the day. Customer retention had reached the highest rate in the bank's history. Loan approvals for minority-owned businesses had tripled, and the Brooks Protocol was now being adopted by 17 other major banks. "You did it," he said quietly. Naomi shook her head, her gaze soft but steady. "No, we did it." Below them, Torres was helping an elderly woman fill out forms to open an account. Laura was chatting warmly with a group of new interns, and on the wall the bank's new philosophy gleamed beneath the lights. Fairness is the foundation. Respect is the standard. Everything looked simple, but Naomi knew that this simplicity was the greatest victory of all. When she turned to leave the lobby, the setting sun cast a long streak of light across her straight arrow, like posture as she walked toward the doors. She felt her mother smiling somewhere. She felt every person who had ever been mistreated gaining a little more hope. And she felt that this battle, long and difficult as it was, had finally managed to shift a part of the world. Before stepping outside, Naomi paused, looked up at the Hudson Federal Bank logo, and whispered, "1 year ago they told me I didn't belong here. Today I made this place belong to everyone." Then she pushed the door open. Manhattan greeted her with new wind. The legacy had begun. From the perspective of an organizational culture expert, Naomi Brooks's journey shows that lasting change does not come from momentary outrage, but from the courage to face the truth, to build systems grounded in fairness, and to return a voice to those who were once dismissed. If you believe in the power of transparency and justice, make sure to like and subscribe so we can continue spreading inspiring stories like this one. And before you leave the video, drop a comment with the phrase "Fairness First"